Okay, so I am on a break from the spa, so I'm in my spa clothes right now, but we're on part 4 of our little business series of how to invent a product, how to start a business in that realm. I mean, not any businesses aren't started all the same way. And this part is going to focus on manufacturing, how to find a manufacturer, some of the complications with that, and kind of how that process goes. So I was really fortunate with this process because at the time we lived in South Bend, Indiana. Now South Bend is known as kind of a hub for manufacturing RV homes. So they do a lot of injection molding and working with plastic parts and whatnot. Had I lived in my hometown of Idaho and where I am now, it would have been a lot more difficult. Idaho is not known for manufacturing, and I didn't realize at the time how lucky I was and how easy that process was for me versus how it is for most. So at the time, when we got this idea, it was just drawn out on a piece of computer paper in the kitchen. I was very pregnant. I was probably, well, no, I think I was 3 months pregnant with Rockney, my 4th baby, and or 5th baby. I'm sorry, he's number 5. And I, of course, talked to my husband about it, but we kind of had this notebook of ideas anyway. When we met, I owned a dance studio. He was, of course, we were both in college, but we got married within 5-6 months of meeting each other, and he immediately started a roofing company on his own with his brothers and friends. We bought a Hawaiian Ice snow cone franchise that we ran for a couple years, and a lot of my dance students and my sisters worked for us there. And so we kind of always worked for ourselves and had other businesses. So it's not like when I took him this idea, he was going, oh, this is life-changing and she's gonna do this. It was kind of like, okay, great, another crazy idea from Mecinna. So he wasn't, I don't think he realized how fast I was gonna move with this. And he was in residency, so he was gone a lot. He was always at the hospital. There's a reason it's called residency. They pretty much reside at the hospital, so he wasn't around all the time. So when we first started talking about it, he was like, yeah, it's great, but this is not good timing, and we have no money to start this up. We're paying for medical school. In the summers, we were moving every summer to Texas or Florida or Arizona to sell pest control. He'd sell pest control for 3 months, and we'd make enough in those 3 months to pay for usually half a year or all of our living expenses for med school, so we didn't have to take out loans for living expenses. And he's a great salesman, and so he always did really, really well on those summers. So we had just come back from that, and I do remember him saying no, but he has to tell me no a lot because I'm a little much sometimes, and so I didn't really take it as a no. I just took it as a maybe later. And so after he left, I got in the phone book. I didn't know what the process was called. I just knew I had this great idea on paper. I didn't know if it was called injection molding. I didn't know that if it was thermal forming. I didn't even know what any of that meant. So I got in the phone book and started looking up manufacturers. And there were a dozen different types back there. If I looked that up in the phone book in Idaho, I don't know that I'd find one, but back there were several options. So I started calling them, and I said I'm looking for plastics manufacturer, and that was enough to get a meeting. And when I went to this meeting, and they are my manufacturers now. I have worked with several manufacturers. We've worked over in China, like everybody recommended in the first few years. It was a disaster. I still have one product made in China. It's still a disaster. I hate dealing with it every single order. But this manufacturer that I have is absolutely top-notch. And when we say made in America, this manufacturer, they are the reason that we should be proud to be made in America, because this operation with them is run so much better than any other manufacturer I've worked with, and I've worked with probably 5 or 6 now at this point with all the different products that we have. So I got very lucky, and I consider that a big blessing because I didn't know any different. So I go to this meeting. Jared's at school. I honestly don't know at that point if he even knew I was going to this meeting, and I was late. I got lost on the way there, and I walk into this meeting. I'm hugely pregnant. I'm very flustered because I'd gotten lost and I knew I was 5-10 minutes late. And I walk into this meeting, and it's a big oval table with like 6 guys sitting around this table in suits. And I'm going, oh my gosh. And I knew right then I am way over my head. Like I have no idea what I'm doing here, but now I gotta fake it and act like I do. So we went through this meeting. I told him the idea. I told him what I wanted to do with it. I did have some sort of a plan. Like I wasn't completely stupid. And I remember the first thing, and I still remember the guy that told it to me, he said, okay, where are you at financially as far as starting this up? And I mean, we had nothing. Like I was teaching dance classes and my husband was in residency and we had almost 5 children and I was 27 years old. So he said it's about the cost of a new car to buy the tooling, which is your steel mold that they use to manufacture and to injection mold. Our process is with the dripstick is injection molding. And okay, at that point, I mean, I'm just a Mormon girl from Idaho. We don't buy new cars. So when he said it's the price of a new car, I'm thinking $3,000 to $4,000 because my first new car, new to me in high school that I bought, was $3,200. And so I'm like, okay, I can maybe swing that. Like I could find that money and make this work. And then he slides across the table the actual cost, and it was $68,000. And I was thinking, my first thought was, who buys cars that are $68,000? That's not the cost of a car. So, and this was 10 years ago as well. And so I'm like, all right. And now normal people right then would think, maybe we should give this a little thought. My thought in these situations always is, how do I work around this and figure out a way to make it work for me? And as I'm getting older, I'm nearing 40, I'm starting to learn that though it's gotten me far in my life, it's not always the best approach. I don't need more work and I don't need more trials and more to do. But at that point, it was, who do I know that has money, who loves me enough to help me out with this, and what are my options here? So I went home and called my father-in-law and pitched him the idea, and he was very smart about it. Like he was all for it. He says now that he recognized that it was a great idea at the time, but he really made me do the work. I remember him wanting me to write up a business plan. He wanted a mission statement. He wanted a marketing plan. It wasn't like, here's a check. It was, you have to do this and this and this. He was going to be the bank, but I still had to do the work as I would with a bank. And there was contract, there was all of that kind of stuff. They were very involved in the business for the first few years at this point because they had made that initial investment. Now, keep this in mind when doing this business. That is your largest expense, or was for us at that time, but it was definitely not the only expense needed. And I do feel like this is where people drop the ball. They think as long as I can get my mold and figure out how to manufacture these, I'm set. You can have, I've learned, I can have a warehouse with 200,000 dripsticks in it, but if I don't have a plan and more finances to implement that plan, it's not going to do me any good. It's a liability rather than an asset to have those pieces sitting in my warehouse. So you have to have a plan. And in this industry, you can't go, at that time, you couldn't go very far without doing trade shows. So my first trade show, to give you an example, was the FMI's, the Food Market Institute show in Chicago, which was only about an hour and a half away from where I lived. And so I had no transportation expenses. I drove myself. I had no hotel expenses. I stayed with my best friend who was living in Chicago at the time, Katie Hart. And all I had to pay was to get in the show and to get my booth. That was $10,000 almost. I think it was $9,200. Okay, when I look at pictures now of that first booth, it was sad. Like, I thought it was awesome. It was not, especially compared to what we do now. I had my table with my little graphic tablecloth. I had my 6 dripsticks, one of every color, my fat pregnant belly. My feet were so swollen. By the end of the first day, I was having a hard time even moving around that huge trade show floor. I'd had to set it up myself, tear it down myself. It was quite an experience, and at that time, a lot has changed in 10 years. I can go to a trade show now, and there are a lot of women everywhere, and I'm not an anomaly. Then I was like the only woman at that show, and I remember looking, and I was pregnant, so it was even worse. And I remember looking around thinking, all these men in suits, and here I am. I have a cat on my lap with her tail going crazy. Hey. It was quite a learning experience, and it was intense. It was executives. We did well. So it was exhausting, and I hadn't really realized what it was going to be like. So that was our first trade show experience, and you know, we would do 4 or 5 a year at the beginning to really, and that's really the only way to meet buyers. You cannot, and I don't know, maybe some can. I've never had the talent to be able to call a company and say, I want a meeting with your top seasonal toy buyer, and get that meeting and be able to fly out and meet them. I usually have to meet them first at a trade show, or they've contacted me through some avenue. And I think a lot of people think you can just send a box of samples out with a price sheet and you're going to get orders. And it does not work that way. They want to see that you're set up. They want to see that your business is solid. And if they're going to, I mean, it takes some of these companies a lot of work just to set you up in their system so they can place invoices with you and pay you. They're not going to take that time to set you up if you're not a stable business and can show them that you're going to be around for a few years, and that, you know, that you're worth their time. And it's the same with the manufacturer. My manufacturer, after that first meeting, they took me on right away, and we got going. I put that down payment on that tool. I was so lucky in that it was 10 minutes from my house. Okay, seriously, come here. And I could walk on the floor of that plant anytime, and their engineers showed me how they put together CAD drawings. They showed me how how the presses work, how the pieces come out of the press and how they're assembled. I got to see everything, and I got to be part of it. They really let me do what I wanted, and it was a very fun process. Our family would come to town, we'd take them right to the molder, and all the kids would be walking through the floor with all the workers in the assembly line doing their thing, and they were really good to me, and I thought that was normal. I thought that you should be that involved, and that you should know how these presses go, and you should look at your polypropylene beads when they come in the huge gaylords, and you should see your barrels of colorant sitting there. And now, 10 years later, I know that is not normal, and most people never step a foot inside their manufacturer's plant. So I'm super grateful for that knowledge and for what I learned in that process, because it did give me a lot of confidence, and that I do feel like I know a lot more about manufacturing and a lot more of what to look for. When we've had other manufacturers in the past, like more recently, and I asked to fly down or to drive down and meet them and go through the plant, they're always so surprised. And it's almost like they don't want me to come. Like, why would you want to? Like, that's our part of the job. You just place the orders and we'll ship them to you. And I've learned a lot of it usually is they're not as, and it's B&B Molders is who it is. I should give them credit because they are completely fantastic. But it's such a well-run operation. It is very organized, and I've never seen another manufacturer that does it that well and has it that together. And it shows. It shows in the pieces they produce, and it shows in how the work goes. So when you're choosing your manufacturer, be selective. Make sure they're willing to work with you, but also be aware you have to be able to offer them stability. They are not going to put the time into making that mold, getting your CAD drawings together, and having all their engineers work with you just to have you order 10,000 pieces one time and realize you don't know what you're doing, you can't sell these pieces, you don't have a solid business structure, and you're never going to order again.